when you're in sales and things aren't going well, man, isolation is the last thing that you need, right? Because
Oh man.
you start getting in your head, tying up your whole self-worth and your performance. And if you don't have people coming alongside of you, not only helping you get better, but just like encouraging you, like that's really, really important. And so I think that's a big part of what we're trying to create. I think it's helpful to step outside of kind of your own little bubble and hear from other people that are doing the same things you're doing. And ultimately that's going to help you get better.
Welcome to Unfiltered, the official podcast at propertymanagement.com. I am your host, Dylan Scroggins, and riding solo today. My fellow shotgun comrade, Matt Spear, who's the president of propertymanagement.com, isn't on the call today, had some other things going on, but we are excited to welcome Ben Smith, the founder, CEO, El Presidente of BrightReach on the pod today. So Ben, give us a quick intro, and man, we got a lot to dive into today.
Yeah, Dylan, thanks, man. I'm honored and excited to be on with you. Yep, just quick high-level background. Live here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been in sales for about 14 years and half of that-ish in the property management industry. So have worked with a few different vendors in the space, starting with a little company called Filter Easy, which became Second Nature. And all the way to this year, 2025, I went out on my own and launched a business focused on helping property managers grow their business. So I feel fortunate that I've been able to make a few different stops and pick up a lot of perspectives and meet a lot of good people along the way. So
yeah, that's one of the reasons we want to have you on here is that you didn't pay to be on here. I'm hoping to go to Elevate SKO in January. So maybe you can buy me a steak or a beer or something.
Yeah, I think we could work that
karaoke efforts in Nashville. But we wanted to have you on here because we have a lot of owners that are, let's say, 200 to 500 doors and want to get to 1,000. We got a lot of other owners that are 1,000 and want to get to 2,000. We got other folks who are at 750 and kind of want to be at 600, right? So there's a lot of different people here. But interesting enough, the reality is they can only talk about their business. You've got your eyeballs on a lot of other businesses. So your time at, some of the best vendors, partners, whatever you want to call them in property management, at Second Nature, Profit Coach, now BrightReach, what you're building there. That's why we wanted you on here, man, is that you've got your eyeballs on a lot of different folks. You're behind the scenes with a lot of different businesses. So with that foundation laid, we talked a little bit about it before. A lot of PM owners are very operationally focused from a personality standpoint. They love traction. They love EOS. They love culture index. A lot of operator people. Talk to us about the trend now of sales not being a cuss word anymore and people seeing it as a competitive advantage locally, but also for their peace of mind. So we're getting right into it, man. I'm a sales guy, if you can't tell.
Yeah.
Let's deals.
I think what you said about a lot of business owners being very operationally minded, I think that's really true. And I think part of it is the nature of property management in general, right? It's very operations heavy. You have to have good processes and systems in order to, maintain what you have. And then especially if you want to scale your business. And, I think right around the time that I came into the industry, which was 2018, this concept of hiring someone within your company to be focused on growth and business development was kind of a new hip idea, right? I think some of that is because back then there just weren't, honestly, as many property managers around. And so it was pretty common that the majority of your leads came through referrals or somebody would come to your website because you had good Google reviews. I think what's happened now is the marketplace has changed a little bit. I think there's more information out there than ever for folks who want to self-manage their property. I think there's more competition. There's more people that have seen the business model and said, oh, recurring revenue, cool, I'm going to start a property management company. As well as, people's search habits, right? Like how they find vendors, who could potentially manage their property. And so there's been a lot that has changed. And one of the things that I get really excited about is helping business owners kind of think through growth for their organization. Who is your ideal client, right? Like if you're in a major metropolitan area, the goal is probably not that you manage every single rental property because there's plenty that you don't want to manage. There's plenty of owners you don't want to work with. And so getting really clear on who those types of people are that you want to work with, but then also having a really good process that you take a prospect through that ultimately hopefully leads to winning business and successfully onboarding them and growing your company. I liked what you said. You made a point about, hey, somebody might want to be at they're at 750, but they might want to be at 600, right? Like, I think that's one of the interesting things about growth in this industry is that you're always going to have churn that naturally happens, right? Even if it's just a couple percentage points, somebody decides to sell a property, right, when the market's good. And so you want to obviously replace those owners in most cases. So it doesn't really matter what your growth goals are. You may not want to be 1,000 door company, but if your growth goals are a little bit more modest, right, it's still important to kind of think through what you want, who are the types of people you want to work with, and kind of allows you to be a little bit more selective with what you bring on if your growth goals are a little bit more modest. So there's no one size fits all for sure.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And in my experience with talking to a lot of property management owners, it seems like operations gets a ton of attention in the
Mm,
L10 meeting. It seems like turns and maintenance and all these things and the dumpster fire literally and figuratively
mm,
gets the most attention. But sales, typically the only question is how many leads came in, how
yeah.
many did we convert? And there's not as much time and planning around that. Once again, we talk on this pod a lot. Like I'm the one guy that's like the third party objective source here because I don't own a PM business.
Yeah.
But that seems to be a trend is that there's just not as much intentionality around building a sales process.
Mm,
So walk us through like what are some questions, what are some things that people need to be thinking of, whether they're at 500 or 1,000 doors of like, hey, like let's actually like think about this, put pen to paper and actually get a plan in place. We literally have a plan for everything else, but
mm.
not and when it comes to accountability, driving more leads, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for starters, there's some really foundational questions that you have to be able to answer. And the first I kind of already touched on, which is who is your ideal client, right? Are you more focused on the accidental landlord who just has one property? Or are you really more set up from an operational capacity to serve an investor who has a portfolio, right? And again, no right or wrong. Like I have clients that they're very investor focused and then clients that are very accidental landlord focused. But you really want to be clear on that because if you're not set up well, like let's say all your clients are accidental landlords, but you say you want to work with investors, you have to understand that there's differences and you may not be best served to, help that type of client. And if you're not set up well to serve that type of client, it's going to be really hard to articulate your value to them in the sales process. So that's kind of the first thing is like knowing who you want to work with. Part of that too is like, what are the questions that you need to have answered on the front end to know whether or not someone's going to be a good fit. And that essentially comes down to qualification, right? One of the really interesting things about property management as a business is you're really qualifying two things. The property, right? Is it right? Is it in the geography we want to be in? Is it in the condition that we want to, you know, take this on? But also like you're also kind of vetting the owner, right? Is this the type of person that I want to work with? Is this the person that's going to be blowing up my cell phone every time they get their owner statement objecting to a $150 maintenance ticket, right? So I think there's different tolerance. Some people are very tight about this type of owner, this type of property, but I would argue in most cases you've got to have some sort of bounds in general, even if you are more willing to be more flexible. So again, I think that's just another like kind of foundational thing that you need to have. And then as far as the sales process goes, just being really clear on what the steps are, not only for you but for your prospect. You certainly want to do front end qualification screening. Maybe I'm going to do an on-site consultation. Some companies are really firm on that. Other companies, they don't go out to the property before. But that's a question you need to answer, right? And the reason why it's important to have these clearly defined steps is back to your point about like, oh, we're not getting enough leads or our close rate is low. Those are more symptoms, right? Like that's a symptom that you're seeing. The real problem, especially as it relates to close rate, is where are we losing people in our process, right? Like we may have a ton of leads that are coming in, but we're doing an awful job of moving them from that discovery conversation to the next step. And so if you don't know what the steps are, it's really hard to tell where people are falling out of the funnel. So that's why I always tell people is, when somebody tells me, yeah, we don't have enough leads coming in, it's like, okay, well, what percentage of the leads are you closing? And then you kind of go deeper and deeper from there to try to understand where are folks falling out. Are there The leads may not actually be a problem. The problem is we just don't do a good enough job following up. Right. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's interesting too, because like your team's going to care about what you care about, right?
Yeah.
So if you're a more operator centric owner and you're not having, daily, weekly conversations with your BDM team, it
Yeah.
seems like they're not going to care if they don't think you care about those metrics. And going back to the BDM, and part of my ignorance here, but when I think of sales and property management, 90% of the time I think of BDMs.
Hmm.
So talk to me just about like team structure. Like how much is a BDM? At what point do people start bringing in like leadership to lead those BDMs? Because it seems like a lot of times,
Yeah.
even if it's 2, 3, 4 BDMs, they're all reporting to the owner. So walk us through typical structures you've seen,
Yeah.
what's most beneficial, and how these operator folks are holding people accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in most cases, if you think about the evolution of a business, right, you know, operator starts the business, grows it to a point where they can start adding team members. And there's lots of different philosophies behind that. I think on the one hand, you could say, all right, if sales isn't really a strength, that's a role you should outsource. Or if it's just something that maybe you're good at, but you don't get too excited about it, right? It's the thing that tends to slip through the cracks. And I think that's when you start to have a conversation around, is it the right time to hire a BDM? But really, it's such a complicated question, I think, because I'm not sure how many business owners really do the math on what it needs to look like, what their BDM needs to bring in order to justify taking the step to make that hire. And I think in most cases you're making a bet that, all right, if I bring this BDM in, they're going to be able to do more than I was doing when I was in the seat, right? But back to what we talked about with qualification, right? If you have really strict standards about the types of properties and owners you want to work with, your salesperson is going to get pretty frustrated when they're working deals and then getting to the finish line and hearing from operations like, oh, yeah, like we don't serve that area, or that's
Mhm.
not the type of property we want to work with. So I think you have to be realistic in terms of your expectations on when it's time to bring a BDM in. And, obviously, what you pay that person tends to vary based on geography and that sort of thing. But for the most part, you're looking at a base salary plus commission. My tendency is to recommend folks, as close as you can get to a 50-50 split on target earnings, the better. Because you don't want to pay someone, oh, I'm going to pay this person a $75,000 salary, but their commission only opportunity is only another 10K. Well, they're not going to be super motivated to be out closing doors because
Mhm.
most of their money is guaranteed. So the compensation piece is important too. But you mentioned something about sales leadership, which I think, that is one of the more challenging aspects is, as a business owner, in all likelihood, a small to medium sized property management company, your sales team is probably one person and it's the BDM, and you're managing them. So one of the things I'm really passionate about is helping business owners get better at the sales leadership question, right? And it may make sense to hire someone to kind of be your VP of sales, or oversee that person that's a layer between you and them. But in a lot of cases that's challenging. So I think in general, like if you own a business, even if you have a BDM, you still oversee growth for your company. It's not enough to just hire a salesperson and say like, all right, go dominate the world, go bring the doors in. And unfortunately I've seen that happen. It's just like, all right, if I hire the right person, they'll go be successful and they'll bring on the right amount of doors. The reality is it's like any other role. You've got to lead that person, mentor them, help them develop as a professional and get better. And so having
Yeah.
really clear expectations is important, which you touched on.
And we were talking before this call, Calmar Group, where I'm a founder of, we do
Yeah.
a lot of recruiting in the BDM space. And what we're seeing is that it's I wouldn't say it's unrealistic expectations, but it's actually the preferred expectation of PM business owners to not hire people who have just been a BDM at another local PM group.
Mm,
A lot of the reason being is that one, it's just, I don't know, maybe if they think they're already the best PM group in that local area, why would they want to get a BDM from someone they feel like they're already beating?
sure.
Two, sometimes you can get a lot of bad habits and bad strategies or whatever. So bringing in somebody fresh has been really beneficial. Well, so to come full circle here, a lot of the times the candidates that do well are people that come from like software, from like SMB sales, like fast transactional high close
Yeah.
environments. And they actually like the fact that they want to get out of software and move into a role where you're providing real value, like property
Mm,
management, actually talking to people and not like selling some widget software app that nobody cares about.
yeah.
So the point being is that you got these BDMs that are typically in a stage of career where they do need professional guidance.
Mm,
They do need leadership. They do need some sales training, although they have gotten it somewhere else,
yeah.
but they don't know property management.
Right.
So to expect them just to come in there like with no training, I know there's some great vendors and people in the space that are doing that, which I think is awesome
Yeah.
because, from a recruiter standpoint, that's when I let go. I don't do any of the training.
Yeah.
So I love it that they're in that space. But like even hiring those folks, the leads still need a leader,
Mhm.
right? So I think that's where like I see like a little disconnect is even for that BDM role, they're still coming in not knowing the semantics, etc. They need some like coaching and training even after that first year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely true. And, a really critical question that I would ask someone who's thinking about hiring a BDM is, hey, are you going to be okay if this person brings in little to nothing for the first 60, 90 days, right? Because there is ramp time that's required for someone to get acclimated, to start understanding the industry lingo, right? Even if they have really good sales training, like they still need to understand how to talk to an investor or talk to somebody about their rental property, right? And I think that gets overlooked a lot, right? Like I've talked to business owners who, have been pretty frustrated that things aren't moving quicker. And I think the reality is I've seen folks that I've worked with in the past at organizations like Second Nature, for instance, who, yeah, it took them a little bit of time to acclimate, but they ended up being really, really excellent salespeople. And so just being prepared for that, I think, is important. The other thing too that I think is interesting about what you said, folks kind of coming from software world, is a lot of times those folks are used to working on a team of other salespeople,
Yeah.
right? And
Point.
like when I was with Second Nature, there was such an emphasis on personal and professional development. And I was so fortunate to work under really great sales leaders that were super intentional about helping me get better as a salesperson. And so it's just something to be aware of, right? If you're welcoming in somebody who's coming from a team environment to now being the only salesperson within the whole organization, that's gonna be a little bit different. And so you want to make sure that you're supporting that person, and really, really creating a ramp for them to be successful long term. Yeah.
Cool. No, I like it, man. I mean, I think, that whole sales DNA, a lot of these property management owners want it,
Mm,
but sometimes they don't have it, right?
sure.
Some do, right? And they might struggle with the operational, but you would never expect to hire a property manager or a leasing agent who's never been in real estate. They
Yeah.
could be a super high capacity, high
Mm,
character, high performer, all the things. But if they don't know about property management, it's going to take time.
yeah. That's right.
Well, tell us more, man. I'm just to put you on the spot here with BrightReach. Like, what are typical size of businesses you work with?
Hmm.
What is some of the immediate value you provide? What are y'all doing? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm putting you on the spot here. Once again, you did not pay for the sponsorship. I'm genuinely just curious
Yeah.
as a fellow vendor partner in this space. Like, what value you provide in the market right now? And just as a whole, like, what are you seeing in 2025 going into Q4,
Hmm.
big quarter? Like, what are people talking about when it comes to sales? What's exciting them? What's freaking them out? Just give us the lay of the land, state of the union, sales and PM.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, I started this business back in March of this year. So I just hit my 6 month mark, which is awesome. And feel really fortunate that I've gotten to work with a lot of different companies at a lot of different stages. Right. So, I have clients who really just kind of putting that initial foundational thought behind growth at their company. Like, hey, I need a CRM. I need a sales process. I need to get clear on my ideal clients, right? Some of that really basic stuff that is so important that we talked about, all the way up to working with, organizations that have a team of salespeople, right? And it was me coming in to lead sales trainings, right? And talk about objections that they're getting, challenges they're having, how to, you know, follow up, how to close, like that sort of stuff. So at this point, really, I'm working primarily one-on-one with companies based on what they need, right? And you brought up an interesting point about kind of what's the state of PM sales in 2025, and I think a lot of the questions people are asking are tend to be around lead generation. It's not always the problem, but I think in general people are seeing less inbound leads come to them. I think there's a number of reasons for that, which we've touched on some of them. But they're kind of asking this question like, all right, I used to get my leads this way. Do I need to rethink that a little bit? Do I need to think differently about how we're bringing new opportunities to the table? And so, helping folks come up with ideas around how to go do outbound, right? Whether it's email campaigns, really targeted referral relationships, direct mail, like there's a lot of different strategies out there. I always tell people like, hey, you don't need to do all of them. You need to pick one or two and be really committed to those things for a long period of time because it will take time. So that's the majority of what I'm doing. The other thing that I'm doing is, along with the folks over at PM Path Builders, is putting together what you mentioned, Elevate Sales Kickoff, which is in January 2026 in Nashville, Tennessee. And really, this was born out of my time at Second Nature, right? Being a part of a big team. Every year we got together in January for Sales Kickoff, and it was about team building and skill development and mindset. And I mean, talk about a launch pad to go out and crush your number for the upcoming year. It was incredible. But the challenge in this space is, like we talked about, most property management companies, you've got a BDM, maybe you have a marketing person, but it's a small team. And so, you know, you probably wouldn't go organize a whole trip and a sales kickoff for one or two people. But this event is going to bring together those folks from all over the country, different companies. We've got some great sponsors who are going to come and speak, including propertymanagement.com, and really just take time to like build some community around sales in the property management space. So
Yeah,
a
man.
lot of energy and effort going towards that.
Yeah, I hear you. That's a great idea because I spent 8 years in software sales and
Yeah.
built teams, even B2B SaaS space that actually sold into a little bit of property management,
Hmm.
other kind of home services. But yeah, man, isolation, that's
Yeah.
a fast way to kill a sales team, right?
Totally.
You
Yeah.
got to get people. I mean, salespeople are already a little crazy. You got to get crazy people together. They're going to start thinking they're crazy,
Yeah.
and then they're going to, want to go into like marketing or something. I know you got to keep them crazy in sales, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome, man. That community you're building, and that can really have some massive dividends for those companies. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, listen, man, you've been in it for a long time too. When you're in sales and things aren't going well, man, isolation is the last thing that you need, right? Because
Oh man.
you start getting in your head, tying up your whole self-worth and your performance. And if you don't have people coming alongside of you, not only helping you get better, but just like encouraging you, like that's really, really important. And so I think that's a big part of what we're trying to create, right? Is, hey, you're learning alongside people that are in the trenches and other markets doing exactly what you're doing. And they may be having success with something that you've never thought of, or they might have a point of view on a certain objection or way to handle a conversation that you never thought about before. So I think it's helpful to step outside of kind of your own little bubble and hear
Mhm.
from other people that are doing the same things you're doing. And ultimately that's going to help you get better. So
Love it, man. Well, good stuff. Well, we're still going to do the lightning round here that we do in every episode.
cool.
So, what's the favorite tool or app for your business that you're using right now that could be applicable to a PM owner?
Man, that's a great question. It feels a little bit like a cop out, but I would say I was not an early adopter with Chat GPT, but I'm using it all the time now. And I think I'll give a little hack. So, because everybody knows what
Give us a
ChatGPT
little
is.
bit more than that. 'Cause
Uh,
we've had some people say that. We always push
yeah,
back.
yeah, yeah. I'll get a hack. So, one of the things that I've done, we talked about, I've spent a lot of time talking to folks about their ideal client. And, really getting clear on that. So one of the things I love using chat for is taking my meeting notes and asking it specific questions around my client's ICP or their value proposition, right? And really distilling kind of these big conversations down into a few bullet points. Because I think, especially if you're training a salesperson, or say you're trying to build an SOP around something sales related, right? Having paragraphs and paragraphs of text is not super helpful. So it's really like distilling down what are the most important things here. The other thing I would say that I've used it for, which this is much more tactical, but like if you're doing lead gen, you're doing outbound, and you've got a bunch of different lists from a bunch of different sources, like using chat to scrub those, eliminate duplicates, whittle it down, like
Mm.
that's been a major hack for me as well.
Yeah, I mean, really, the one word that I wrote down, I've got a lot of takeaways, but one of the biggest things is outbound. Because
Yeah.
you're right, man. I mean, we talk about that at propertymanager.com all the time. Of
Yeah.
like, people aren't using Google anymore. Like they are. Like, let's be honest. Like, there's still a ton of people. Google's not going anywhere. They look at reviews. They look at all those things. But also, people know, like Google, the first 7 things you see are all paid. So
Right.
it's like, okay, well, I know people are paying to be at the top. Are they
Yep.
actually the best for me? That's a whole nother discussion. But
Totally.
what we're seeing is more and more people coming in through non-Google avenues, but the role for outbound seems to be higher than ever. And cracking that code, but man, and I know it's hard to train people on that. I mean, you got to have some dogs who want to like make some money. So, like,
Yeah.
if you're going to focus on outbound, it isn't just like, hey, here's a list, start dialing. They need to see how they're incentivized for that, maybe additional
Mhm.
commission for that.
Yeah.
They need to get some talk scripts. They definitely need some community because they're going to get kicked in the teeth way
Yeah.
more than free and inbound coming in. So,
Yeah.
I mean, dude, we could talk a whole
Yeah.
repeat guess on that, but I'm kind of riffing with you here, but it's like, if you are a property management owner and you are disappointed with the amount of inbound, you don't want to give another dime to any of these lead gen tools. For the record, propertymanagement.com is not that. And you want to start focusing on outbound. That's like saying you want to go run an ultra marathon. Like it
Yeah.
takes a plan and discipline and training. You can't just get up and do
Yeah.
it. So anyway, to all my BDRs out there who are saying amen, I hear you, because outbound is tough and
Yeah.
it takes a lot of training, accountability, and community.
Amen. Yeah. Spot on. Exactly right.
Sorry, man. I didn't mean to hijack your answer there, but
No, that's
like,
great. That's
I just
great.
don't want anybody listening to this and be like, oh yeah, outbound. I'm just going to start like telling my BDM to do outbound.
Yeah.
Well, your BDM is going to be out and bound for another company if you don't coach them how to do it.
Yeah, it's a different beast. And there's different levels, right? Like there's some folks that I know that it's like, all right, 75% of what I get is inbound, and with the other 25% of my time, I'm really focusing on referral relationships,
Yeah.
or doing very strategic things. So it doesn't have to be your whole strategy. In fact, I think for most folks it needs to be part of your strategy, but you need to be clear on what you're trying to accomplish. And you also, like you said, you have to be patient, and your expectations have to be a little bit different than what you expect on the inbound side.
Yeah. Different close rate, different everything. And that's why you
Totally.
probably should pay a little higher commission on the outbound.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you are 100% dependent on inbound right now, see this as your sign.
Yeah.
Start taking outbound more serious.
That's
All right,
it.
man. 2 more rapid fire. We got off on a tangent there. What's a book or podcast every PM leader should check out right now?
I'll give you my, especially sales related. If
Oh
you
yeah.
haven't read it, best book on sales I've ever read is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And for those that don't know, it's former FBI hostage negotiator. I mean, I think it applies really well to sales, but it applies to all kind of relationships, and how to really just get better, especially in terms of like negotiation. I think is really good. So I love that. I listen to a lot of the industry podcasts that I'm sure other guests have mentioned. Peter Lohman's podcast. I think Jordan Moyla's podcast was one of the very first that I know of, and that I got introduced to back when I entered the space. And those are just sharp guys with a lot of good things to say. So
Cool. Love it. And then I was texting Peter this morning. Shout out, Peter. Great
hey,
pod.
Peter.
One word to describe the future of PM.
Mm. Pun intended. I'll say bright. I think the future's bright for sure.
Cool. Give me a reason why.
I think that as much as information is more readily available, around self-managing real estate, right? I think the reality is that with things like tenant fraud, regulation, even though there's more information out there, I think it's actually getting harder in a lot of ways to self-manage. And you look at some of the areas of the country where a lot of regulation has come in, having a dependable local service provider is still really important.
Mm,
I don't think property management is at risk of some monster company becoming the McDonald's of property management and taking over every
hard,
market.
man.
It's not. I don't think it's going to happen. So if
Yeah.
you're a locally owned property management company, really focused on building a presence in a certain geographic market, I think you've got an edge.
Love it, man. Well, good stuff. Well, last question. Where can our listeners connect with you to learn more about BrightReach and all the things?
Yeah, absolutely. So website is brightreachsales.com. I'm super, if you well, first of all, I have a newsletter that goes out every week it's called the Outbound Engine. It's very specific to sales, business development in the property management world. So you can check that out on my website. I also post a lot on LinkedIn. I really like LinkedIn. I think it's a great format, a lot of really great conversation there. So if you can find me amongst the 2 million Ben Smiths that are probably on LinkedIn, that would be another good place to
Well,
check
I
out
know
what I'm
your
doing.
mom probably told you you're one of a kind your whole life, but hate to admit it, man, but nah, you're not when it comes to the name. So,
No, I,
uh,
I there was actually a guy within my major, which was very small when I was in college, also named Ben Smith. So we had to put middle initials on everything. I know I'm not special. I know.
it's all good, man. You're special. We appreciate you being here. Very
Awesome.
excited about what you're doing, man. I think what you're saying about outbound, having a plan, like some of these notes I've even thought about for my own business, give me some really
Yeah.
good ideas. But that's what we want people walking away from these combos, especially these like bonus episodes
Mm,
with like trusted vendors and partners in the space. Is like, what's something that I can take away from someone who's talking to a lot more PM
sure.
groups than me? And the fact that you're excited about this industry and excited enough about it to quit your job and to start something new.
Yeah.
It's admirable and impressive, man. So thanks again for joining us. Really excited, see the value that you're providing the market, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Awesome. Appreciate the opportunity, Dylan. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Well, good stuff. We'll talk to you later.